Greetings. You need to put on your headphones.
Johan, hi.
Hey, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
Awesome. Glad you could make it.
Pleasure. So we're going to dive straight in.
Yeah, sure, man. First of all, nice protector shirt.
Thank you very much.
Very cool. Yeah, what can I say? Yeah, first of all, thanks for making the time to have a chat with us. You indicated that you don't normally do these kind of things. Is that correct?
Um, I tend to prefer written interviews because it gives me a bit of time to think about the answers and less time for you guys to edit my ramblings as well. So,
Okay, yeah.
but yeah, any promo is good promo, and we appreciate any medium there is to talk about the band and the record, etc.
Yeah, awesome. I've discovered you guys, it must have been about 6 years ago, maybe more. And I was mainly into the usual, call it old school death metal, and I was familiar with the very technical sort of death metal. And much to my surprise, I stumbled across Sepulchral Voices Bandcamp site and checked out a few bands. And what caught me immediately was the unorthodox songwriting and the arrangements and how the music just sort of puts you in a trance almost. It's got a very hypnotic, churning sort of style, and that caught me immediately. And since then, I've been sort of actually with every release been following it religiously almost. But to go to the question is, what sort of bands influenced you guys into this direction, if any?
Sure. I mean, if I can go back to, let's say, when we started, I don't know if you've ever heard our demo on our first EP, but the songwriting is a bit more orthodox. The influences are very clear as to what they are, and that's things like Beherit, Blasphemy,
Okay.
Shabnagurath, Disembowelment, that kind of stuff, Demoncy as well.
Yes.
Those influences are still very strong, of course, because our listening tastes haven't really changed since we were teenagers, if I'm being honest. In terms of structuring stuff, we do have a bit of, I guess, an influence if we recognize it or don't recognize it from prog and other styles of music as well. But yeah, influences are still pretty much the same. Just old death, old black, and of course anything that's pretty much 80s, 80s metal, late 80s metal.
Yes. Yeah, I find it interesting because then I stumbled across bands like Cruciamentum, and suddenly I at least became aware of this new style. I mean, there's phrases out there like they always have to put it in a box somehow. They call it cavernous death metal or whatever. And but that's what really appealed to me, and I felt there was a new sort of, dare I say, a breath of fresh air in the genre. And so then I only thought back that actually bands like Incantation actually was. Incantation was probably the first band I ever heard back then that sort of did more raw, cavernous approach. So in any case, so how has the pandemic affected you guys? I mean, obviously you brought out your latest release this year. It's a bit of a, let's put it out there and see what happens. Bands have different modus operandi when it comes to the pandemic. Some of them say, listen, we want to get an album out and come what may. Or a lot of them are just sitting on the material and saying, we will only release it once we can actually then immediately go on to tour. But there's no telling touring at all, and I've seen some flyers of yours, Septembro Negro Festival, that kind of stuff. But yeah, how have you been able to play a few shows or?
Yeah, so we played 3 shows so far, 2 of them abroad and 1 here in London. And just to go back to the initial part of the question, we decided very early on in the pandemic to record later that year, so in 2020. At that stage, it was very unclear as to where this was heading. And we've been working towards writing a full length and recording a full length in the summer of 2020 anyway. What the pandemic did beneficially from our perspective was it really focused our attention to completing the material with greater urgency than we would have perhaps done otherwise.
Okay.
And that's not to say we had more time. It was on the contrary, actually. But we individually, even if we couldn't meet for some weeks, we were very focused on what we were doing at home. So it was a case of, recording the skeletal ideas for tracks, sending them into each other. And then once we were able to meet a few months after the pandemic started, the drive and the energy was there just to complete it all. And I think it worked really well. In terms of the idea of releasing something during this very strange phase of ambivalence, let's say, whereby a gig is announced and then postponed and then cancelled and then maybe it goes ahead. It's incredibly frustrating for us. It's even more frustrating, I'm sure, for the people that organize these events. And all we can do as a band is rehearse and make sure we're ready for when authorities sanction what is essentially at the bottom of the list of priorities, which are live events, live music.
Yes, and sadly so. I feel sorry. I know a lot of organizers and obviously bands as well. And the frustration can be felt everywhere. And just looking at the news today, they're now contemplating harsher restrictions with the Omicron variant. So really frustrating to watch, absolutely. I'll give you right there. How's the feedback been to your latest album? From what I've read, it's been really positive.
Generally, yeah, it's been pretty positive, and there have been. I think it took a bit of took it by a bit of surprise because the production elements were slightly different. The songwriting approach was slightly different, a bit more old school, let's say.
Yes.
And I think there were some bit of pushback against this from some quarters, but it's our 4th record, and by a band's 4th record, interest generally tends to wane a little bit for any band. If let's say you're somebody who had been following us from the beginning, that's only human nature. I do the same with bands, and yeah. So in general, it's been pretty positive. We've got a lot of good reviews, a lot of good responses. It's transpiring now, at the end of the year where you see these year-end lists, exactly how favorable it's been received. Ultimately, the most important thing is we're really satisfied with it. And other people's reviews, opinions, doesn't change that at all, really.
No, it strikes me as a band that just does their thing. And for me, it's like I think a lot of bands start out very exciting and then it sort of drops fairly quickly. I think if I look back at from the EPs through to now, it's always been a steady build-up. And I always think it's almost a more healthy development than the other way around,
Yeah, ultimately, we're not a career band. We don't live for touring and playing festivals, so there isn't a pressure placed on us to churn out a record every year or 2 years.
Yeah,
we don't dilute our ideas on that basis. So we work at our own pace. We bring in or maybe emphasize less elements to our sound, which we feel is right at the time. This record is very different from Adore Sepulchrorum, for example.
yes.
But it's still the same band. You can still, the ingredients are still there. And yeah. So really, in terms of the idea of quality, we affix a lot of time into what we do, and we invest a lot of energy as well. We wouldn't want to temper our own sort of internal quality control mechanisms, to just churn out a record. It's not our style at all.
Yeah, and I think you can hear that definitely. A question it's been burning on my tongue is, since I first heard your material, is do you guys record analog?
Yes, we do. So the studio that we've recorded the last 3 records is a studio called Orgone. It's based here in the UK, and the producer who runs it is now a very prominent producer in the world of metal. He's done the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 Paradise Lost records, for example.
Okay.
Angel Witch, things like that. And his way of working is wanting to use all the original vintage methods as possible, but it's not reel to reel. That those days I think are over, and we're probably not tight enough to do that anyway.
That's pushing it, yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of mastering, it often is mastered to tape, as in an old machine. But recording process, big live room, proper amps, lots of mics, and then a bit of studio trickery. But that's just the modern way.
Okay, but no Kemper amps. I take it. So
no.
No, you can hear it. It's just, it struck me immediately. And what I used to do is often I'd listen to the albums on cans, and the warmth that you get from the kit. Immediately, obviously, you notice it's not one of these prefabricated drum sounds that they call it the Andy Sneap method, but you just hear it's a live kit, and you can almost, the listener almost thinks, gee, these guys really hammer it out in one room, almost, and it's that sort of atmosphere comes across. Yeah,
and we don't know any other method, put it that way. We don't know the more modern methods because we never worked in that way, and we wouldn't necessarily want to, because the sort of Andy Sneap method, as great as it is for what he does, that's not our sound, and it's not what we'd want to sound like. And if it came to a decision between a boombox rehearsal recording and a more modern sterile production, it would be the former for sure.
Yes. No, what amazed me also is you have a strong touch of delay, almost, or like a Hall effect on the music. And what amazes me is that with the speed and the sort of technical parts, that you still that the clarity still remains in the songs. I mean, playing that fast and still having clarity, plus having a sort of almost delayed effect even on the instruments. I think that's quite amazing.
Yeah, actually, on this record, the saturation on the guitars is a lot less compared to previous records, because, as you mentioned, the idea of speed, the riffing on the new record is a lot sharper, and it just doesn't necessarily suit a really saturated, reverberated, delayed sound. And that became clear when we were mixing the new record, in terms of the experimentation we were trying and seeing what worked, what didn't work. And when the riffs are like faster and sharper, more reverb just muddies things a bit too much, so it wouldn't have been clear at all.
No. Well, a lot of people seem to think the more the merrier. That's the more eerie, weird we sound, the better. But yeah.
And that was definitely our take on things when we did Odore Sepulchrorum. But we wouldn't necessarily want to record the same album twice.
Yes.
And that's why we didn't opt for that this time round.
For me, it started getting more crisper with the Pilgrim album.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that I think was...
Yes.
I think that was just sort of not really knowing how he wanted the record to sound as such. To give a comparison with Odore Sepulchrorum, we did a rehearsal demo, which we've since put on our Bandcamp page in the past year or two. We had a very strong idea of the kind of sound we wanted to achieve. With Endless Pilgrimage, we didn't necessarily have the same planning in advance of going to the studio. We had the 5 songs that were written quite hastily and arranged even to the day before we entered the studio. And it was a case of, right, this is what we've got, let's record it and see how it comes out.
So you guys still hit the practice room and grind it out there? Or, I mean, a lot of bands now, it's like just sending files back and forth, you know, which I always think you can hear it later on.
Yes, we tend to rehearse a lot, or maybe not as much as we should. But when we write material, it's a mix of different approaches. So we can't just turn up to a rehearsal room with nothing. One of us has to have a few ideas, a skeletal foundation of a track, or at least a few riffs and sequence, and then we will build around that idea, which is often works in a more spontaneous way in the room. But on the new record, there's a mix of different approaches to different songs, and it might be, audible or discernible if you really put your mind to it. Now that I've said that, because some songs I wrote alone during lockdown, just using a click track, and then when it came to meeting up in the room, we arranged things better because obviously with the drummer there, things that might knit fairly awkwardly on a computerized recording don't work well at all, and they have to be structured in a better way.
Yeah, because from my experience with playing with bands is also you often find that with practicing together, you sort of iron out things, you know, or make it smoother, or it just gets a dynamic of its own. And yeah, often you can hear that and actually pick that out. Another thing that also struck me is that you don't go for the normal sort of diabolical lyrics. It's more, yes, based around the occult, and but it's packaged in a very refreshing, very new way. Is that a correct sort of view, or?
I never really compare like what we write so compared to other bands and their approaches. In fact, to be honest, when it comes to metal lyrics, I have very kind of little reason to read a lyric sheet unless it's something that's discernible or very catchy.
Yeah.
So I never really tried to take influence from other lyric writers. I might try to gain a bit of perspective on the theme of the song that is attempted to convey. For example, one example that's always mystified me in some way is Jewel Throne by Celtic Frost, and like
yes.
what the kind of the symbolism of this was, and all this this kind of very mysterious way that it's formulated. And I can only write about what I know and try to understand and put into writing. And for example, I'm not a horror movie fan necessarily, or at least I'm not like a enthusiast. So the idea of putting horror is just something, it's not in my realm. The same with things like lyrics about beheading nuns or whatever. It's not in my wavelength of how I express myself, or at least what the riffs kind of express as well. And the lyrics are almost an accompaniment to the music. The music is communicating what it needs to be done, and the lyrics are there just to add that perspective, I suppose.
Almost like another instrument.
Yeah, in a way. And more and more what we're doing is really matching lyrics to the musical feel. So in most cases, we don't have lyrics pre-written. They're written after the song, and the song gives enough visualization to have that kind of synergy between both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of fits, yeah. So I'm contacting you now from Germany. So since I've known you guys, I've always been on the lookout. Have you done any shows in Germany at all?
Oh, loads.
Loads, okay.
Yeah, and over the years, yeah, many.
And I'm just unfortunate to be in a region where there is just nothing, and I think we've had the Finnish band Corpses. They've been here in the vicinity somewhere. But I recently talked to someone at a club. They had Mayhem, not Mayhem, they had Marduk and Valkyria playing more of a black metal thing. And They actually had them in succession now the last few years, and I just had to talk to the organizer and said, there are other bands, why don't you give them a shot? And but
which region of this is
I'm about an hour from Hanover.
Okay.
Now Hanover is not as much metal as it used to be in the 80s. It used to be quite a sort of epicenter for bands. But I think nowadays you have to look more in the direction of Düsseldorf, the Ruhrpott region, or Berlin, or Hamburg for that matter, because it's quite close to the UK, obviously, and a lot of Scandinavian bands make a stop there. And so, yeah, basically, and I was like sort of just saying, there are a few bands that are really exciting and new, and why don't you feature them? But it's obviously not as easy as just doing that. It's like the band has to be sort of en route anyway, and then we say, listen, make a stop here and play the night here at our club. So he said it's more difficult getting a band from the UK or Poland or whatever, just for a once-off show or two shows, obviously. So that was sort of the theme of our discussion, basically.
Sure. I mean, we played in the Ruhr region a few times, Berlin, Hamburg, even Nuremberg, Saarbrücken.
Awesome.
That's it, I think. That comes to mind. But yeah, we've been quite a few times to various parts of Germany.
Stunning. Cool.
And we will be, if all things go well, we have a tour booked for late March, early April. And that's, I can't remember of how much cities it's going to, but that's coming to Germany as well. Berlin for definite, maybe one more.
Oh, you must definitely share with me. I'd like to post that. And
yeah, so it's with Ruins of BEVERAST.
Ruins of BEVERAST. Okay, I must actually make a note of that and just scan that. Well, that's actually quite a good match. That's a German outfit, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I also saw you played with Necros Christos. I think Necros Christos have disbanded, but you were label mates or something, hey?
Yeah, we've known the guys for pretty much since we started and since they started. Kind of by surreptitious chance, we met at a festival in Germany back in it must be now 2003, maybe 2003. So we forged a very good bond personally and musically as well, and in terms of correspondence. So it was a really natural fit to tour with one another back in 2013 or whenever it was. Which they've disbanded, but of course Malta is now involved with another band, Sijin, who just released a record this year again on Sepulchral Voice, which you've probably
come across. Okay. Yeah.
And that's a very different style to Necros. It's totally 80s. Think Old Morbid Angel, Infernal Majesty.
Wow.
It's very much probably very much up your alley, I would imagine.
Cool. So, and have you guys been over to the States at all?
Yeah, we have. We've done a few shows there, actually. Okay. Nothing too extensive. We haven't done a long, cross-country tour, but we've done some shows on the East Coast and the West Coast, and also a Maryland Death Fest.
Okay, awesome. Wow. Great. So obviously you guys are now waiting to perform live. Are you, I mean, now with the time given, have you been sort of scratching around with new tracks, or is it more just, you just want to get out there?
It's a mix of both, really, but started putting together some ideas for some new material, which I'm kind of working on at the moment, very, even today, but it will take time, of course, as it always does with us, but we'll be working pretty hard over the next year, and we'll have, in the absence of shows and tours as it has been, we have a lot of energy that we want to put into new stuff, and that we have a lot of fire that's burning. So it's going to be a busy period with or without gigs.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think everybody is sort of biting their nails and eager to get out there. I get that consensus from everywhere, and I can only hope that you guys can really get going soon.
Yep, it's not in our hands, so It's something that I'm trying not to necessarily think about, because we've been pretty fortunate to have gone abroad twice in the last months to play shows. It has happened, it can happen, and probably as long as it's not in winter, it will happen.
Great. Yeah, that sort of sums it up from my side, really. Anything you would like to say? Get out there.
Well, just thanks for the opportunity for having us on, and
Pleasure.
to everyone watching, check out our records, all of them.
Will do. If you have any links that you would like to add, obviously I'll post the links that I know from Bandcamp and all that underneath the video once I post it. But if you have anything additional, feel free to mail me.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, I'll send some clips. We have a pro video that we did for this record, and some live stuff as well.
Awesome. That'd be great. I'd like to incorporate that. And obviously, if the tour, I'll also keep an eye out if the tour with Ruins of BEVERAST materializes. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's been announced. The dates are there to view. So
okay, great.
If that happens, it's all there.
I'll have an eye out.
Cool.
Thank you for the music.
Thank you, man.
Cool. It was nice chatting.
You too. Take it easy.
Go well.